Hey, my name is Jake Carter. I'm 27, and I own a small bakery called Sweet Corner on the edge of Portland, Oregon. It sits between an old hardware store and a laundromat that always smells like fabric softener in the mornings. Nothing fancy. The tables don't match. The menu board is handwritten, and the chalk smudges every time it rains. The front door makes this loud, cheerful jingle every time someone walks in. But if you come early enough, around 5:30, you'll smell warm bread, melted butter, cinnamon, dark coffee, and caramelized sugar all at once. That smell is the best part of my day. I live in the tiny apartment right above the bakery. My life is pretty much the same every single day. Wake up at 4, cold water on my face. Downstairs, knead dough, bake, open shop, sell, clean. Count the money. Sleep before my body has time to remember it's tired. Some people would call that boring. My ex-girlfriend definitely did. She said I was a good guy, but my life was too repetitive. Same flour every morning, same bills every night, same weekend spent fixing the old mixer or testing new recipes. She wanted someone with a bigger future, a nicer apartment, a more exciting schedule. I didn't blame her. But after she left, I stopped believing love was something meant for people like me. I just focused on keeping Sweet Corner alive. My older brother Rowan is 30. He's a lawyer. Wears nice suits, drives a clean car, speaks with confidence, and always makes our mom breathe easier when she talks about him. In the family's eyes, Rowan is the one with potential. I'm the one who dropped out of business school to buy a failing bakery. Mom loves me, but she's never really understood why I'm happy standing in a kitchen before sunrise with flour all over my hands, just to watch a batch of croissants rise perfectly. That Friday afternoon it was raining. I was wiping down baking trays when Mom called. "Jake, can you do me a favor?" Her voice was too sweet. I already knew it wasn't going to be small. "I'm baking, Mom. Rowan is sick." "Then tell him to take medicine." "It's not that simple. He has a blind date tonight. I set it up with Olivia a long time ago." I closed my eyes. "Mom, just listen. The girl's name is Emma Bennett. She's very accomplished, but she keeps to herself. If no one shows up, people will think our family is rude." "So you want me to go instead?" "Just to explain. Tell her Rowan is sick, apologize, and leave. 10 minutes, that's all." I looked down at my shirt. Flour on the sleeves, butter stain on the collar. My hair probably smelled like baked bread. "You really think a 25-year-old baker showing up instead of a 30-year-old lawyer for a blind date is a good idea?" "I think you're a kind person. Sometimes that's enough." I didn't believe that for a sec, but I couldn't say no to my mom. That evening, I closed the bakery earlier than usual. I went upstairs and changed into the least wrinkled white button-down I owned, though it still couldn't hide the small flower mark on the cuff. Before I left, I stopped at the flower shop on the corner and bought a small bouquet of white daisies. Nothing expensive, nothing fancy, just clean, simple, and at least it looked like I tried. The meeting spot was a fancy patisserie near the river, much nicer than Sweet Corner. Tall glass windows, warm golden lighting, pastries displayed like art pieces. I arrived 15 minutes late because the bus got stuck in the rain. When I walked in, I saw her right away. Emma Bennett sat at a corner table by the window. She wore a simple black dress with a cream coat draped over the chair beside her. Her dark brown hair was tied low. In front of her was an untouched cup of tea and her phone open to a photo of Rowan, my brother in a navy suit, confident smile, the picture of a successful man. I suddenly felt like a wrong delivery. I walked over. Emma looked up. Her eyes moved across my face, my shirt, the flowers in my hand, then stopped on the flower stain on my sleeve. I sat down across from her and took a breath. "Hi, I'm Jake Carter. My brother is sick, so I came instead." She didn't say anything. I kept going, the words rushing out because I was embarrassed. "Rowan was supposed to be here. I'm not trying to pretend to be him. I just came to explain so you wouldn't think you got stood up. I'm sorry this is weird." Emma studied me for a few more seconds. I started to stand up. Then she asked, "Did you bring me flowers?" I looked at the daisies like I'd just remembered I was holding them. "Yeah, I figured if I was going to be late and the wrong guy, I should at least bring something." She took the bouquet. Her fingers brushed the white petals and her expression softened just a little. "A replacement date in a blind date," she said. "That's interesting. Sit down, Jake. At least tell me why you have flour on your shirt." I sat back down. I only planned to stay 10 minutes. But 10 minutes turned into half an hour. I told her about Sweet Corner, about the old mixer that sounds like it's about to explode, about the time I accidentally used salt instead of sugar for a wedding cake and had to stay up all night remaking it, about Mrs. Helen, the 70-year-old regular who buys one cinnamon roll every morning and always says, "It's a little drier than yesterday," even though they're exactly the same. Emma laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. She covered her mouth quickly like she was surprised the sound came out of her. Then she told me about herself. She's 32, CEO of a fintech company, lives in a downtown penthouse, works with investors, boards, contracts, and meetings that last so long, the coffee goes cold 3 times before they end. She spoke calmly, but every sentence carried the exhaustion of someone who's been called strong so often that no one ever asks if she wants to rest. Then she mentioned her younger sister, just one sentence. "My sister passed away in an accident 3 years ago. Since then, I haven't been very good at being a normal person." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything cliché. I just pushed the small plate of pastries toward her. "Try one. People are usually 3% less sad when there's butter involved." Emma looked at me. 3%? I don't have official research, but I have field experience. She laughed again. When we finally left the patisserie, it was still raining. I stood under the awning, not sure how to say goodbye. She held the daisies against her chest. "This wasn't like the date I was set up for," Emma said. "I know, I'm sorry." "No." She looked at me. "I meant, it was nicer." I stayed quiet. She continued, "It was the most pleasant conversation I've had in months." I didn't know where to put those words in my chest. That night, I walked back to Sweet Corner in the rain. The shop was closed, but the smell of butter still lingered in the air. I set my keys on the counter and looked around the small, familiar kitchen. For the first time in a long while, my life didn't feel quite so small. Maybe I showed up to the wrong date, but something inside me wasn't sure it was a mistake. I didn't expect to see her again. People like Emma Bennett don't step into lives like mine for more than one strange night. They have penthouses, black cars, packed schedules, and men who know how to choose wine without ever getting flour on their sleeves. So when the bell above Sweet Corner's door jingled on Tuesday morning and Emma Bennett walked in, I almost dropped the tray of croissants. She wore a long gray coat, carried a laptop bag, and had her hair pulled back neatly. She looked around the small bakery like she was stepping into a place that didn't exist on her usual map. "Morning, Jake." I stood behind the counter, still holding the tongs. "Morning. You mentioned if I ever stopped by Sweet Corner, I'd get a free croissant." I thought that was just small talk. I'm a CEO. I take butter-related promises very seriously. I laughed. She ordered a black coffee and an almond croissant. I gave her the best one from that morning's batch. She sat at the small table near the window, right beside where I usually keep my recipe notebook. The shop wasn't busy yet, just 2 regulars reading newspapers, so I worked while we talked. She asked how croissants get so many layers. I explained that the dough has to be folded over cold butter again and again. You can't rush it. If it gets too warm, the butter melts. If you roll too hard, the layers tear. If you don't let it rest, the pastry won't rise right. Emma looked at the croissant on her plate. "Sounds like a lesson in patience. Laminated dough doesn't forgive impatient people." "My job is the opposite," she said. "Everything has to be fast, precise, no softness allowed. No one cares if I'm tired, as long as the results look perfect." I glanced at her. That morning, under the pale sunlight coming through the window, Emma didn't look like the cold CEO from the news articles. She looked like someone who was very tired and just wanted to sit still for a few minutes, without the world pulling her away. From that week on, Tuesdays became Emma's day at Sweet Corner. At first, she said she only came for the croissants. Then she started bringing her laptop. She'd sit in the corner, order black coffee, open emails, take online meetings with wireless earbuds, and every now and then glance over at me kneading dough like it was her favorite show. I slowly learned small things about her. She hates coffee with sugar. She prefers lemon pastries over chocolate. She has a dry sense of humor, says something sharp, and then watches me to see if I get it. She rubs her left thumb against her wrist when she's stressed. She doesn't like when people call her a strong woman, because sometimes that's just a polite way of saying We're going to keep expecting you to carry everything. And she learned more about me than I meant to let her. She noticed I always save the nicest pastry for Mrs. Helen, the 70-year-old regular. She heard me talking to the mixer when it breaks down. She saw me quietly giving discounts to high school kids after classes. She realized I get uncomfortable with compliments. So whenever someone says the bread is good, I immediately turn away and wipe a table that's already clean. One morning, Emma stood at the counter watching me roll out dough. I want to try. I looked up. Try what? Kneading, rolling, whatever makes you look like you're fighting a cloud of white. I handed her an apron. You sure? Flour doesn't respect social status. Perfect. I'm tired of being respected the wrong way. I led her into the back kitchen. At first, Emma was terrible at it. She kneaded too gently, like she was afraid of hurting the dough. Then she pressed too hard and got flour everywhere. When she tried to dust more flour on the counter, she knocked over half the bag onto the floor. We both stared at the white mess. That was a bold move, I said. Emma looked at me. Are you going to fire me? You're an unpaid intern. My firing power is limited. We both crouched down to clean it up. While reaching for a spoon that had rolled under the table, her hand brushed mine. We both froze. It wasn't a dramatic touch. It wasn't some movie moment. Just two flour-covered hands meeting on the kitchen floor. But the whole room went quiet. Emma looked at me. The sharp edge she usually carried was gone. Her eyes were softer, more careful, like she'd just realized she'd stepped somewhere dangerous without wearing armor. I pulled my hand back first, not because I didn't want to keep it there, but because I wanted it too much. That night, after I closed the shop, Emma asked if I wanted to grab pizza from the food truck by the river. We stood under the small awning eating hot slices on paper plates, then bought ice cream from the corner store. When it started raining, I brought her back to Sweet Corner. We sat in the tiny break room behind the kitchen on the old couch I bought from a customer years ago. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, the light was warm and yellow, and everything smelled like flour, cold coffee, and vanilla ice cream. Emma ate her ice cream with a plastic spoon, quiet for a long time. Bad day? I asked. She looked at her cup. A deal fell through. The board said I was too emotional in one decision. The investor said I need to be tougher. Olivia told me to take a break. But if I take a break, everything waits for me to come back and fix it. I didn't tell her to be strong. I didn't say everything would work out. I didn't offer advice. I just said, you don't have to be strong all the time, Emma. If a day is bad, you can just call it bad. She stayed quiet so long I thought I'd said the wrong thing. Then she spoke softly. It's been a long time since anyone gave me permission to be tired. I looked at her. In that moment, the woman who lived in a penthouse, ran a multi-million-dollar company, and signed contracts I couldn't even understand looked like a girl who had been running too long and couldn't remember the last time she sat down. I reached over and placed my hand on hers. Not a confession, not a promise, not pulling her closer, just a quiet hand. Emma looked at our hands, then laced her fingers through mine. That night, I knew we were no longer just a bakery owner and a regular customer. But I also knew that was exactly why everything was about to get complicated. The fact that Emma started coming to Sweet Corner regularly couldn't stay hidden for long. The regulars began noticing. Mrs. Helen asked who the woman in the expensive coat sitting in the corner was. The newspaper delivery kid winked at me every time Emma walked in. Even the milk delivery guy joked, "Your bakery's got a VIP now, huh?" I smiled through it, but inside unease started growing. It wasn't because I was ashamed of Emma, it was because I was terrified that one day she would look at Sweet Corner the way an outsider would and realize how small it really was. That fear got worse the day Rowan showed up. My brother appeared one rainy afternoon wearing a charcoal suit, polished leather shoes, and holding a black umbrella. He stood at the counter and looked around the bakery like he was assessing a property that needed renovation. "Still the same, I see," Rowan said. "What do you want?" "Coffee." I poured him a cup. He didn't drink it right away. He looked toward the back kitchen, where Emma had once stood, learning to knead dough, then back at me. "Mom mentioned Emma Bennett comes here a lot." I set the coffee pot down. "She's a customer." "Just a customer?" I didn't answer. Rowan gave a thin smile. "Jake, you know she was originally introduced to me. You were sick and couldn't come. I really did have a fever. I'm not saying you lied, but you went instead. And now you're keeping the opportunity for yourself? The word opportunity made something twist in my chest. Emma isn't an opportunity. Rowan leaned on the counter and lowered his voice. I get it. She has money, status, connections. A woman like Emma Bennett could change anyone's life if they stepped into her orbit. Are you talking about a person or an investment? His face hardened. I'm talking about reality. Emma isn't like you, Jake. She doesn't belong in a tiny bakery covered in flour. Can't you see how mismatched you two are? I wanted to say that Emma liked the bakery, that she laughed here, that here she didn't have to wear armor. But a part of me heard Rowan's words and couldn't dismiss them, because I had thought the same thing myself. Rowan continued, I don't want you getting hurt. Women like her might find your life charming for a while. Simple, honest, different from her world. But when the novelty wears off, what then? Do you really think she'll choose this hot kitchen over her downtown penthouse? I clenched my hands under the counter. Finish your coffee and go. Rowan looked at me for a long moment, then placed money on the counter. Don't let feelings make you forget your place. After he left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The tart I had been working on had gone cold. The rain against the windows made the whole shop feel gray. That night, Emma texted, Can I come by tomorrow? I want to tell you something. I stared at the message for a while before replying, sure. But from that day on, I started creating distance. Not obvious enough for her to call me out on it, just busier, less time sitting with her. When she came into the kitchen, I said it wasn't a good day. When she asked if I wanted to grab dinner after closing, I said I still had bookkeeping to finish. Emma noticed. Of course she did. One afternoon, she stood at the counter holding her black coffee. Are you avoiding me? I wiped the counter. No. You're always busy, but before you still looked at me. That sentence left me with nothing to say. On Emma's side, the pressure was building too. One of her friends, Olivia, came to Sweet Corner once. She was polite, but her eyes swept over the mismatched tables, the old chairs, and me before turning to Emma with poorly hidden concern. Later, Emma told me what Olivia had said. You built a multi-million-dollar company just to end up counting croissants in a suburban bakery? Emma said she got angry, but I could see another question in her eyes. Am I escaping? Do I actually like Jake? Or do I just like the peace he gives me? If I step into his world, will I ruin the simplicity he has? We started moving around each other carefully, and that carefulness hurt more than any real argument. The first real explosion happened on another rainy afternoon. Emma arrived earlier than usual. I didn't hear the bell because the wind had jammed it. She stood just outside the back kitchen at the exact moment Rowan was talking to me. Rowan said, She's the opportunity our family has been waiting for. Don't ruin it just because you think she actually cares about you. I was about to argue when Emma stepped inside. Her voice was cold enough to turn off the ovens. Opportunity? Rowan turned, face paling. Emma, I didn't know you were... You think I'm some kind of deal? No, I just... Just what? Just think I'm a way for your family to climb another social ladder? Or that Jake is stealing something that was supposed to be yours? Rowan went silent. I stood between them, heart pounding. Emma looked at Rowan, but every word landed on me too. I don't come to Sweet Corner out of pity for Jake. I'm not here to rebel against my world. I come because here I can breathe. Here no one expects me to be the most perfect version of myself. If you don't understand that, then you never really wanted to know me. Rowan's face flushed. Emma, I'm sorry if you misunderstood. I understood perfectly. My brother looked at me like he wanted me to say something, but this time I didn't rescue him from the embarrassment he created. Rowan left. After the door closed, Emma turned to me. The anger in her eyes faded into something more painful. Do you think that too? I knew she wasn't asking about Rowan. She was asking if I thought she would eventually leave. If I thought she was just resting in my life. If I thought this was just a rich girl's curiosity about a small bakery. I wanted to say no, but fear made me hesitate for 1 second. Just 1 second. Emma saw it. She set her coffee cup on the counter. I see. Emma, no, you're not ready to trust me, and I can't force you to. She walked out into the rain. I didn't run after her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid that if I did, I would have to admit that what scared me most wasn't Emma leaving me. It was that I actually believed she might stay and then be proven wrong. 3 days passed without Emma. The corner table by the window stayed empty. No black coffee to brew. The nicest almond croissant of the morning sat untouched in the display case until afternoon. I told myself this was better. Emma needed to go back to her world. I needed to keep my bakery. Ending things early would hurt less, but saying it didn't make me miss her any less. I missed her in the kitchen more than anywhere else. I missed the way she stood awkwardly at the flour table trying to knead dough like she was closing an important deal. I missed the streak of flour on her cheek. I missed the sound of her laughing when she dropped a spoon. I missed the chair she always chose, the coffee cup she left beside my recipe notebook, and how the small kitchen somehow felt warmer just because she was in it. 3 days isn't long, but it was long enough for me to realize that Sweet Corner was still full of butter, sugar, and coffee. Yet without Emma, it had gone back to being just a small, hot, cramped room that felt too quiet. Saturday evening, as I was about to close, the bell above the door rang. Emma walked in. No expensive coat, no laptop, no sharp CEO expression. She wore a gray hoodie, yoga pants, hair loosely tied, and carried a paper bag full of bright yellow lemons. I stood behind the counter. We're closed. I know. Emma, I want to learn how to make lemon bars for your mom's birthday. She held up the bag of lemons and tried to smile. I bought too many. Probably enough for the entire state. I should have said it wasn't a good day. I should have kept my distance. I should have let her go before we hurt each other again. But I had missed her so much that just seeing her standing there made the kitchen behind me feel warm again. I unlocked the back door. Come in. We made lemon bars. I showed her how to zest the lemons, how to cut cold butter into flour for the crust, how to press the base into the pan, and how to whisk eggs with sugar and lemon juice. Emma was still clumsy. She dropped eggshell into the bowl, sent flour flying onto her shirt, and whisked so hard that a streak of lemon juice splattered onto my cheek. She looked at the yellow streak. I'm sorry. I grabbed a towel. You just assaulted me with vitamin C. The corner of her mouth lifted. The air between us softened a little. While the tray was in the oven, we cleaned the floor together. Flour was everywhere. We both knelt down, each holding a cloth. Her hand brushed mine on the white tiles. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. Emma looked down at our hands. I've been thinking a lot, she said. About the penthouse, my job, Sweet's Corner, about you. I stayed quiet. She looked up. Don't interrupt me. If you do, I'll lose my nerve. I nodded. Emma took a deep breath. The penthouse is beautiful, but every time I go back, I only hear my own heels echoing in a space that's too big. It feels more like an expensive hotel than a home. She looked around the kitchen. Here it's different. It's loud, hot, messy. You grumble at the mixer. Flour gets in my hair. Customers complain the bread is too sweet and then come back the next day anyway. But here, I don't feel like I'm performing. My hands tightened around the cloth. Emma, what are you saying? She looked at me for a long moment. Don't interrupt. If you interrupt, I'll lose my courage. I nodded again. Emma's voice was steady, but her eyes were shining. I want to leave the penthouse. My heart dropped. No! She froze. I stood up. No, Emma, don't say that. This isn't a movie. I wake up at 4 in the morning. The kitchen is hot. The floor is always sticky with flour. Rent keeps going up. If the oven breaks, I lose sleep. Some weeks, I'm not even sure I can pay the part-time staff. There's nothing here that looks like your world. Emma stood up too. You keep saying these things like I haven't seen them. You've only seen a few mornings and evenings. You haven't lived it. Then let me try. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Until when? Until you miss the penthouse, the glass walls, the people calling you a genius? Emma's eyes darkened. You're speaking for me. No, I'm being realistic. No, Jake, you're scared. The words hit so hard I couldn't speak. She stepped closer. You're scared that one day I'll wake up, look around this small kitchen, look at you covered in flour and realize I chose wrong. I looked away. My voice came out low. I'm scared of more than that. Emma stayed quiet. I swallowed. I'm scared of believing you. I'm scared of letting you step into this life, of letting you hang your coat next to my apron, of letting you see the days I fail. Then one day you'll realize Rowan was right, that I'm not enough, that I'm just a warm break between the big parts of your life. Emma stood very still. I kept going, my voice cracking. I once had someone tell me my life was too repetitive. It took me years to stop letting that sentence hurt. Then you walked in, sat at that table, laughed with me, and now I want to believe this small life could actually be enough for someone. Emma stepped forward and took both of my hands. Jake? I didn't pull away. She spoke slowly, clearly. You are not the lesser choice. You are the real one. I looked at her. I've had money, I've had status, I've had the view from the top floor, and I still felt empty. What I didn't have was the feeling of living without having to prove myself every single second. Her voice trembled. I'm scared too. I'm scared of leaving the world I built. I'm scared people will say I've lost my mind. I'm scared I don't know how to love someone without turning everything into a plan. But the thing I'm most scared of is you deciding for me that I should leave. The kitchen fell silent. Inside the oven, the lemon bars began to fill the air with the smell of citrus, butter, and sugar, and something that felt like a new morning. I looked at Emma, the woman who had walked into the wrong blind date, the woman who had sat in my bakery every Tuesday, the woman who had spilled flour on the floor, eaten ice cream on the old couch, stood up to my brother, and then come back with a bag of lemons like her heart had never been broken. I couldn't keep loving her by pushing her away. I pulled her into my arms. She stayed stiff for a second, then wrapped her arms around me tightly. I spoke into her hair. If you really want to stay, I won't decide for you that you should leave. Emma closed her eyes against my shoulder. Then I'm staying. I lifted her face. She looked at me, eyes wet but not turning away. In that moment, every fear, every difference, every word Rowan had ever said felt far away. I kissed her. Our first kiss wasn't perfect. Her lips still tasted like lemon, my hands were covered in flour, the oven timer was beeping behind us, and the kitchen floor was still half cleaned. But when she wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me back, I knew I didn't want to stand outside her life anymore. When we pulled apart, Emma rested her forehead against mine, breathing softly. I'm still staying, she whispered. I smiled, touching my forehead to hers. I know. After that night, Emma didn't quit her job immediately. She wasn't impulsive, and I didn't want her to destroy her entire life just to prove something to me. She started slowly. She shifted part of her work into an advisory role. She handed a few projects to her senior team. She rented out the penthouse instead of selling it right away. Then, little by little, she began bringing things to the apartment above Sweet Corner. A few books, sweaters, an expensive coffee machine, and a mug that said CEO off duty. She helped me go through the bakery's books, but she never tried to take over. She never tried to turn Sweet Corner into a corporation. She just sat beside me after closing, pointed out overcharged fees, suggested seasonal items that might sell well, and found ways to promote the shop without changing what made it feel like home. For the first time, I understood that change didn't have to mean betraying who I was. Sometimes change just means opening another window in the room you already love. 1 year later, Sweet Corner wasn't struggling the way it used to. The new sign above the door was still handwritten in the old style, but brighter. The bakery's social media had nicer photos, mostly taken by Emma on mornings when sunlight hit the trays just right. We had more orders from local offices, a small seasonal corner, and a new stand mixer that didn't growl like a monster from the basement. But Sweet Corner was still Sweet Corner. The tables still didn't match. Mrs. Helen still complained that the cinnamon rolls were a little drier than yesterday, and then bought an extra one to take home. The menu board was still handwritten. The front door still jingled loudly. The smell of butter and coffee still filled the shop every morning. Emma didn't turn my bakery into some flashy brand. She understood that was the thing I feared most. Every change she suggested started with the same question: will this keep the old feeling? If the answer was no, we didn't do it. She still did some financial work, but it no longer swallowed her entire life. There were mornings when I was measuring flour and she would come down the stairs in an oversized sweater, hair messy, eyes still sleepy. Give me flour, she would say, and don't make me talk before coffee. I handed her the coffee first. She took it, kissed my cheek quickly, then put on her apron. Now 2 aprons hung side by side in the kitchen. One was my old one, covered in flour stains that never quite washed out. The other was Emma's, light blue when she first brought it, now marked with butter, lemon, and chocolate. We still argued. Emma wanted a clearer ordering system. I hated the idea of the bakery feeling like a corporation. I wanted to keep the old apple pie recipe. Emma wanted to try a salted caramel version. Once the oven broke during the morning rush, customers lined up outside, smoke filled the kitchen, and we both got snappy. But unlike before, neither of us walked away. Every time we fought, we came back to the same question. Are we fighting each other, or are we fighting the problem? That question saved us more times than I wanted to admit. My mom slowly accepted Emma. At first, she was afraid Emma was just romanticizing a simple life. But then she saw Emma standing in the kitchen at 5 in the morning, hands covered in flour, patiently learning the lemon bar recipe my mom loved. One afternoon, Mom pulled me behind the shop. I used to think Rowan was the one who belonged with a girl like Emma, she said. I stayed quiet. Mom looked through the kitchen door at Emma, dusting powdered sugar over a tray of lemon bars, serious as if she were signing a $1 million contract. But I understand now, Mom said. She doesn't need someone like her. She needs someone who lets her be herself. Rowan came back to apologize too. He admitted he had treated Emma like an opportunity instead of a person. I didn't hug him, but I placed a cup of coffee in front of him. Emma didn't choose me because I won against you, I said. She chose because she wanted to be here. Here, Rowan nodded. I know, I see that now. The final moment didn't come with fireworks. It happened on another rainy afternoon. A regular customer watched Emma writing down an order and asked, "Do you ever miss the penthouse life? The high floor, the glass walls, looking down at the whole city?" Emma stopped writing. I was pulling croissants from the oven, but I heard every word. She looked around Sweet Corner, at Mrs. Helen reading the newspaper, at 2 high school kids sharing a brownie, at the rain sliding down the windows, at me standing by the oven with flour on my hands and probably messy hair. Then she smiled. "The penthouse has a nice view," she said, "but this place has someone waiting for me to come home." That night, after we closed, I asked Emma to stay in the kitchen for a minute. She was taking off her apron when I said, "Wait here." She turned. "Are you hiding another receipt from me again?" "No, this one's worse." I pulled a small box from the drawer where I kept my recipe notebook. It wasn't a fancy ring box. It was one of Sweet Corner's mini pastry boxes tied with a pale yellow ribbon. Emma looked at the box and her smile slowly faded. "Jake?" My hands shook as I set it on the flour table. "I thought for a long time about where to do this," I said. "Some nice restaurant, a place with a city view, some perfect evening." I opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring resting on white parchment paper, surrounded by a few dried white daisies from the first bouquet I had ever given her. Emma's eyes immediately turned red. But then I realized, I continued, the only right place could be this kitchen, where you spilled flour, where you said you wanted to stay, where I kissed you for the first time, where I started believing my small life could actually be enough for someone. I got down on one knee. Emma covered her mouth. "Emma Bennett," I said, my voice not entirely steady, "I can't give you a penthouse. I can't give you a life that's always clean and beautiful and easy. But I can give you every morning here, every fresh batch of bread, every argument we solve together, every day I choose you with everything that's real in me." I looked up at her. "Will you marry me?" Emma was crying, but she was smiling. She didn't stay standing like people do in movies. She knelt down in front of me instead. Both her hands came up to hold my face. "You still think you only have a small life?" she whispered. I couldn't answer. She kissed me. This time it didn't taste like lemon like our first kiss. It tasted like tears, butter, coffee, and the year we had built together. When we pulled apart, she held out her hand. "Yes," Emma said, "I'll marry you." I slipped the ring onto her finger right there on the kitchen floor of Sweet Corner, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and the flour we still hadn't finished cleaning. Outside the window, the new sign glowed softly in the rain. Emma looked at the ring, then at me. "Do you remember that blind date?" I smiled. "Yeah, I showed up for someone else." Emma shook her head. "No, you showed up exactly where you were supposed to be. We just didn't know it yet. I pulled her into my arms. Our happiness wasn't in penthouses, glass walls, luxury cars, or the praise she used to receive. It was in the smell of fresh bread at 5 in the morning, in 2 aprons hanging side by side, in the little notes Emma left in my recipe book, in the fights about burnt batches that always ended in laughter, in the simple silver ring on her finger inside the kitchen where we learned to choose each other for real. Sometimes the person who walks into the wrong date turns out to be the right one. And sometimes what makes someone stay isn't a more glamorous life. It's the feeling of finally being allowed to live as themselves.